welcome everybody to the Verona.
You have to unmute.
Oh, sorry, identify. I want to welcome everybody to the September 28th Verona Board of Education public meeting. We're calling the meeting to order, and it is 7:05. If you would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The reading of the meeting notice. This meeting is being conducted in compliance with the open meeting session that the Verona Board of Education passed a resolution at its annual reorganization meeting held on January 5th, 2021. The meeting set forth the schedule of its regular meetings, which resolution was within 7 days of passage. The schedule was sent to the Verona Cedar Grove Times, the Star Ledger, the Township of Verona, and the VEA. Postings of this meeting setting forth the time, location, and agenda were posted at the Verona Board of Education office and on the Verona Public Schools District website. The Verona Board of Education operates under a consent agenda format. Any board member has the right to have an item pulled to be voted upon or discussed separately. Copies of tonight's agenda and resolutions have been made available to the public and the press. Mr. Cruz, can you please do the roll call for attendance?
Sure. Mr. Allworth.
Here.
Mr. Day.
Here.
Mrs. Strappi.
Here.
Mrs. Fresky.
Here.
Mrs. Prisco. Absent for the record. We have quorum.
Excellent, thank you. So we do have a presentation tonight, and we have Dr. Frank Mauriello. He's our district special services director, and he is going to present on a mental health topic tonight. Dr. Mauriello.
Good evening. Dr. Dionisio, Verona Board of Education, thank you for this opportunity this evening to speak about our district's mental health programming. Before we get started, I'd like to go through a little exercise. A college professor did this for me. I then implemented it in my own practice as a school social worker. What I would do is I would show our students a glass of water. And I would ask them, tell me about this glass of water. Some of the students would guess how much it weighed. Some of the students would think that the glass is half full. Some of the students would think that the glass is half empty. However, the absolute matter of the weight of the glass doesn't matter. It depends on how long you hold on to it. If we hold on to this glass for a minute, we could probably get through it. Nothing will happen. If we hold this glass for an hour, our arm may begin to ache. If we hold this glass all day long, my arm would probably feel numb and paralyzed. Well, now let's substitute that water for what some children may be feeling: anxiety, depression. And the longer we hold that glass, the heavier the glass becomes. The stressors of the world, if we replace this water for a little bit, it's really no problem. But if we hold on to it for a little bit more, it begins to hurt. And if we hold on for days on days on days, it's really going to hurt. And we may feel paralyzed and incapable of doing anything. I share this example with you because as I share with you how we've developed our mental health programming throughout the district, I'm going to refer to this analogy so that you can see the mindset that as a district we put together so that we can support all our students. This was part of my presentation that I gave about 2 years ago. The thing that stands out the most, and the thing that still bothers me today with the data that is out there, is that it takes 11 years for the average delay between symptoms of onset and treatment. What does that mean in simple terms? Students, adults may be showing mental distress, mental illness, but they're not getting the proper treatment that they need for about 11 years. We wouldn't do that for our children who are in our special education programming, and we shouldn't be doing that for our students that are struggling with mental health. So here, I share with you what we have in Verona Public Schools for mental health, and we're going to go through the PowerPoint presentation, and we're going to talk about some of the outcomes and some of the initiatives that are present on this screen. However, I really want to stay focused when speaking about our programming about this. Although we have outcomes and initiatives that are in front of us, it is the process that impresses me the most here in Verona, that impresses me the most when we built these programs. We had the community come together, establish a need, allocate money, and move forward in the best interest of children. Our students aren't just coming to school with book bags full of books. They're also coming back to school with book bags full of emotions. Emotions that social media drive, emotions that sometimes our families drive, emotions that sometimes their friends drive. It's been very impressive to me to see how our teachers and our administrators have stepped up and have learned how to deal with these type of students in our schools and getting them the proper supports and referral services if needed. So let's talk about our first program, St. Clair's Hospital. St. Clair's Hospital is a is a hospital that we do our risk assessments. For those of you who do not know what risk assessments are assessments that we send students out of district for when they are in danger of hurting themselves or others. We use St. Clair's and Dr. Platt as our district's platform in servicing families in that area. So let's talk about the risk assessments. Our back to school assessments, which is the new name for our risk assessments, St. Clair's decided to take more of a positive spin. Instead of scaring students and students feeling fear and going for a risk assessment, they call it back to school assessments. These back to school assessments are done within 24 to 48 hours. It allows us to have parent as part of the initial setup. It gives them a safe environment. What we used to have to do with some of our students that we sent out for risk assessments is we had to send them to sometimes hospitals. And those experiences in those hospitals, because you were dealing with all sorts of issues that were going on, whether it be illnesses or mental health, families did not feel safe. St. Clair's established an off-campus, not in the hospital risk assessment process, and a location for our families to get access to risk assessments when need be. Documentation is shared with the school district. In addition, they also have a higher level of care if a student does need it. Let's look at effective school solutions. When we talk about St. Clair's and when we talk about effective school solutions, when we look at the analogy with the glass of water, that's the paralyzing phase, the numbness phase. These are the programs that are dealing with our students who need the most support during their time here. Through ESS, we have seen that we've been maximizing the numbers through the last 3 years. We maximize our spots. We've noticed that attendance has improved, GPAs have improved, and the decline in disciplinary actions have improved for this population. In addition, we are able to educate more of our students in the least restrictive environment by educating them here who are struggling with mental health issues. As you can see through the chart, our out-of-district placements went from 7 down to 4 when it came to dealing with students with mental health issues, and that is because we're able to maintain them in district with the appropriate supports and services in order for them to stay here. In addition, what ESS has allowed us to do is allowed us to buy more time for our school counselors to deal with students who are just having a bad day. In the past, because a student who is struggling with mental health illnesses was monopolizing many of our school counselors' time, by having the ESS in the school, it has allowed us as a school district to now deal with some of the small things that pop up during the day. allowing for us to engage students so that some of their anxiety and depressions may not manifest into something larger. Let's look at Peek-a-Pack. Peek-a-Pack was delivered at the elementary school. It is a social and emotional learning program. This social and emotional learning program creates a Peekaville for students to work through an avatar that they create, which allows them to then engage in certain programs on the web. In addition, our school social workers at the elementary school level are implementing social and emotional lessons right there in the classrooms and working with the students. So let's talk about Peek-a-Pack in action. Here we can see that Peek-a-Pack over the last 3 years, and this is teacher interactions per grade, per school level, has increased. These are teachers, mostly led by the school social workers, who are engaging with the Peek-a-Pack curriculum and talking about certain topics that are delivered through their stories and through their Peekaville. We have students checking in with their feelings. We have close to 400 plus students that are playing games on the internet through Peekaville and also checking in with their feelings on how they're feeling while they're at home. We also have students, as you can see, the data here is a little skewed because we implemented it in 2018. In 2019, 2020, we had great involvement. And then in 2020-21, due to the pandemic, we had a lower level of involvement. Mainly because we were dealing with, the school social workers were dealing with the students within the buildings as opposed to doing the lessons. Those lessons didn't pick up until January again of that school year. Here you can see the student usage and topics when they go to Peekaville. And they play with their avatars. They tackled stories of gratitude, self-regulation, respect, perseverance, empathy, and they visited the Peek-a-Pack library while they were using it. Those other topics that are shown here, teamwork, kindness, and courage, and optimism, are all topics that are up and coming in the next couple of years with our social and emotional learning. So let's talk about some of the new enhancements. We have Thrive Alliance Group. Thrive Alliance Group is coming in and training 15 school counselors, child study team members, and school social workers throughout the district. This training is a training for them to earn a certification as a wellness mental specialist. What this certification allows us to do is it allows us, when students are holding that glass of water for a certain amount of time where it may hurt a little bit, allow for us to engage them and work with them, and doing it in a clinical psychoeducational experience. We've implemented full-time social workers, 1 per 2 elementary schools down at the elementary school. So now we have Mrs. King and we have Mrs. Lustig working at assigned to 2 elementary schools. So now we've taken a population where we had 1 school social worker dealing with 1,000 students down to a 1 to 250, a 1 to 400 ratio in certain cases. We've implicated, based on the Surgeon General, Attorney General, there's a Handle with Care program. So the Handle with Care program, how that works is that there is a collaboration with the Verona PD, that any involvement of a student that is a part of our Verona Public Schools, they are able to talk to us about what happens. And then if there are supports that those families need, I'm able to help support them and give out those supports to those families in those situations. So here is where we're trying to normalize mental health. We need to have the conversations with the community. We have a lot of great things going on inside our district with our programming, but here we're going to start working on educating our parents and our community around mental health. So part of that is our community mental health speaker series through Rutgers Universal Behavioral Health. Currently, you've probably gotten hit with many emails in regards to this, but I'm really trying to get it out there because, sometimes people don't get to see their emails. But, we have Dr. Kelly Morris coming this Thursday in this auditorium where we'll be presenting she'll be presenting on supporting your child after the pandemic. We'll have an opportunity for a question and answer at the end of it also. In addition, we are going to hold our first on May 14th, 2022. We are going to be holding our first community wellness fair. Our community wellness fair is not going to be geared around talking about anxiety and depression, but it's going to be more geared toward teaching our students and our families and our parents the coping skills such as yoga, CrossFit, exercise, on how we're able to help support our students in regulating themselves in that manner. So in closing, what I want us to realize is that all these programs together, what we are looking to do is we're looking to teach those students that are holding this glass of water to just put it down, that when they feel that they're in a dark room, to take a deep breath and trust that their eyes are going to adjust so that they're able to find the light switch. And like Martin Luther King has stated here, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. And that's what we need to teach our students. Any questions or thoughts?
Thank you, Dr. Mauriello. As a teacher, I can't express the importance of this right now more than ever. Tim seeing it, I have to unmute on here, I'm sorry.
Here we go. I still can't figure this out. I'm really sorry. I'm just starting, what I feel, just starting to really see the effects of the pandemic on my students. I feel like it really hasn't hit them until these past 2 weeks. I'm starting to see more behaviors. I'm starting to hear from parents about what their children are experiencing now that they're back in school. It's been a rough reentry, I think, not for all students, but for quite a few. And I think this couldn't come at a better time. Particularly looking forward to hearing updates about how the Thrive Alliance group application is working, and hearing feedback from our, from our teachers and our counselors regarding that.
Just speak to that, Ms. Jackie. We went through our first week. Sorry about that. To speak to the Thrive Alliance, we're starting our second week of supervision and just finished the week before was our first week of supervision. And I have to say, it was very encouraging to see that our school counselors emailed me after going through their first week of supervision and said how grateful they are that we're bringing this program in here. We're really able to sit there and dissect individual cases and make supportive treatment plans for the students that are coming up during those conversations. And it's really giving us a whole other level of tier in regards to how we're supporting those students that necessarily aren't paralyzed, right? But are struggling and that need that support. But I'm happy that is moving forward in that manner.
I just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Mauriello. It was an excellent presentation. When you talk about our first community wellness fair, what's that going to look like? Do you have any idea yet of what venue and how far out into the community we're looking to reach for that?
So what we've done is we've reached out to vendors, CrossFit, yoga studios, those type of things, to have them have a station and an area on the high school football field where they can run classes for parents and students during that time. There will be food trucks there, right? Because if you don't bring food, people don't come. So we're going to bring food trucks in. Some of our law enforcement will be there with cop cars, fire trucks, so that kids can engage our people who support us in that manner there. And then the day will culminate with a motivational speaker at the end.
Thank you.
And I just want to chime in and thank Mr. Mauriello, Doctor, I forgot to say doctor now, so Dr. Mauriello, for all the things that you've done to elevate the mental health awareness and mental health capabilities and resources of our district. And just for the example of ESS, when you talk about the students and how GPAs have gone up, the grades have gone up, the attendance has gone up, things like that are, due to the staff and what you've done to help elevate where we are today. So I know it was a challenge years ago when I came on the board here 8 years ago. Mental health we were sort of struggling, and you brought us to where we are today, and it continues to improve upon it. And I'm very happy for what we've done, and thank you for the presentation today.
I appreciate the comment, but it could not have been done without the community and the board support. But I really do appreciate the comment.
As well. I think it's great that we're being proactive about this. I agree with Mr. Ackley. I've known people about a month, and it's taught for years. You're just starting to see some of the cracks.
If unmute on Zoom.
I guess I didn't. I think I was unmuted and then I muted. So let me start over. I think it's great that we're being proactive here because, like Mr. Appy said before, I think we're just starting to see the impact on all the students. I've been in school for about a month, and I'm just catching some of the differences in some of the students over the last couple of years. And the more we can be proactive and set up these systems to try and support them is better for everybody. So I think it's great that we're attacking this now.
Yep.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Mauriello, thank you very much.
Dr. Mauriello, thank you very much.
I know as a board, we discussed this, as an administrative team, we discussed this. It's really incredible to see.
It's really incredible to see the progress that the district has made over the past 6 years. Has really embraced moving forward and creating a more inclusive culture focused on social emotional learning. It's amazing to see the leadership. It's amazing to see our staff rise to the occasion and be eager and willing to take on new challenges, to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can in the district to work together to support our students and to really cast that net as wide as possible, to be proactive, as the board has referenced and you mentioned in your presentation around social emotional learning and starting at a young age, as evidenced by the focus on Peek-a-Pack and making sure that we're assessing and identifying students' emotions early on. So we're not waiting 11 years before we identify what students need. The professional development for our staff is critically important. There's always going to be more work there, but it's impressive to see not only the programs and the supports that we have, but how our staff has really responded and risen to the level of expectation in order to make sure that we're meeting our students' needs. The levels of intervention to make sure that we are addressing the students' needs when they're in crisis, and that we're being as proactive and preventative as possible with programs like Effective School Solutions, and then programs like the partnership with Thrive. And I'm really excited to see the next level with these community programs that you have and engaging more people in our community around wellness and having these parent speaker sessions as well. So thank you very much for the presentation tonight. Very well done, wonderful work. And thank you to you and the whole department and our staff for doing such an amazing job supporting our students.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Dr. Mauriello, I would like to open it to any public questions based on your presentation, if that's okay with you. If any members of the public have any questions or comments in regard to that, just please come to the podium or.
Oh.
Do you need me to state my name?
Yeah, name and address, please.
Okay, this is Joanna Gagas, 22 Otis Place. Will there be a virtual option for people who can't actually attend the community mental health event? And do you have a date for that community wellness fair?
For all our speakers, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be recording it and putting it up on our wellness website, as well as this board meeting, so that parents can engage in this PowerPoint presentation and those type of things. And the wellness fair is May 14th, 2022.
Shannon Heffernan, 83 Franklin Street. This is my first time having a student in the district, so I apologize if some of these questions are obvious. But for the St. Clair's back to school assessments, or is that to assume that's for any at-risk behavior, including suicidal ideation or self-harm, or would those kids still be forwarded to?
Can you just say it again, because he was playing with the volume and it broke up for me.
Oh, sorry. I just had a couple questions. So one was about the St. Clair's with the risk assessments. Is that for any kind of risk behavior, including suicidal ideation, or would those kids still be forwarded to the emergency room? For the PICA-PAC program, is that required learning for all students? And if so, what grade level? And how does that, how is that initiated or implemented?
So our risk assessment process doesn't discriminate against any age level or any interaction that happens that does. So pretty much kindergarten on through can go for a risk assessment. And we use Columbia Suicide Assessment as our baseline in order to refer people out for that issue. But if a child is in danger of hurting themselves or others, we'll also use St. Clair's in regards to that. As for PICA-PAC, that is a kindergarten through fourth grade program. So Mrs. Lustig and Mrs. King, depending on what elementary school is being supported by which social worker, will be starting those implementations soon. Principals and social workers have sat down, put together their schedules. So there will be social and emotional lessons going on at least 2 to 3 times a month in those areas. So if you're new to the district or new as a kindergarten parent, most likely you'll get your logons and those type of things through the school. No.
And if that is all the questions from the public for Dr. Mauriello? Again, Dr. Mauriello, thank you so much.
We appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. Mute.
And at this point, we are going to continue on with our regular agenda. And we have the superintendent's report by Dr. Dionisio.
Hello again, everyone. Good evening. Just 2 very brief updates. First, there's been some communications from Dr. Miller in our curriculum instruction and assessment office and from our schools regarding the New Jersey Department of Education Start Strong assessments during the months of September and October. So the assessments enable the state of New Jersey to meet the federal statewide assessment requirements to administer general assessments in English language arts, mathematics, and science for the school year. We have assessments that are taking place at our grade levels. The communication went out on that. So we encourage everyone to read up on how it impacts their child and the school schedule. And our principals and teachers will do a fine job in implementing those assessments. Furthermore, we also have at the high school, which is typical, we have the PSATs that will be taking place in grades 10 and 11, and that will be coming up shortly as well. And then the last update that I have is around the referendum construction project. So Mr. O'Brien, the construction manager for Legacy Construction Management, provided me with an update to be able to share out to the board. The progress continues on at all of our schools in regards to piping work. After school, air conditioning has been increased and turned on in designated areas of the schools as they are what they call commissioning the univents and the air conditioning systems. Last week when we had the professional development in-session day for our staff, the construction company, Environmental Climate Control, was able to come in and also schedule daytime shift to be able to get more work completed. And they're making very nice progress, and they're looking to continue to ramp up their production and stay on their timeline with completion by fall of 2021. And that concludes the superintendent report.
Thank you, Dr. Dionisio. Does anybody have any questions based on that? So if not, we're going to move on, and we have our business administrator report by Mr. Cruz.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. I have a few updates for tonight's business administrators report. First, I would like to provide an update on finance. In tonight's meeting, we have the July board secretary, treasurers, and the budget transfer report, and they're all in agreement. We recently closed out our prior fiscal year ending on June 30th, 2021, and verified all revenue accounts. We're also in the process of reviewing and applying for carryover for funds with available balances for the 2020-21 school year. And the last thing on finance is the business office is also working closely with our auditors to prepare for the 2020-21 audit taking place in December. On an update on another item is regarding the National School Lunch Program. Over the last week, we've engaged in conversations with our elementary school principals to determine the impact on the SCA fundraisers and the program at each school that the SCA funds. If Verona joins the National School Lunch Program, SCA is not allowed to sell food or fundraise with food or beverage items during the school day. Since our last board meeting, I've also had conversations with Cedar Grove to better understand their transition to the National School Lunch Program, the impact on food portion size, quality, and also the impact on the school culture. Later this week, we'll be sharing out a short survey for parents, guardians to provide their feedback on National School Lunch Program. And in the interim, my office is reviewing all free and reduced lunch applications. As of today, 15 students applied and were approved. This is covered 100% by the board. We're encouraging all families that qualify to submit their applications as soon as possible. And then lastly, we do have some exciting news for Verona Public Schools. For the past 30 years, we've used the same financial management system. I'll repeat, the past 30 years, we've used the same financial management system, and that's from the 90s. And I remember the 90s, I love them, but we shouldn't be loving a system from the 90s. So if you could imagine, it does have many limitations. And this system is responsible for our financial systems, payroll, and human resource transactions. Today, we're proposing to the board a new financial management system that will allow our school district to enhance systems, to be an enhanced system that is completely paperless and integrates with our student information system. I'm recommending that our school board approves Genesis SchoolFi as the system of choice, and the go live date for this implementation will be January 1st, 2022. Mr. Altian Bilaj will be leading us in the implementation along with the Genesis SchoolFi team. The cost of our current system, Edgement, is $22,690 a year. Genesis will be costing us $22,910 a year, a difference, an increase of $220. The annual cost, the actual annual cost savings will be significant. Switching our system will save us over $3,000 a year, which represents the cost of the special purchase order forms that we use in our current system and the postage that we spend every time we mail out purchase orders that have to be manually printed and signed, and also the cost of postage for checks, payments that go out. This action item will be added to the agenda for the next board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Cruz on that? If not, I just want to say I'm really excited for you to get the new financial system. I think one of the things that you spoke about in regard to the financial system was that it integrates with our benefits program as well. So our staff, once we're all up and running, are going to be able to link into their benefits and do some management on their own as well. So I think there's going to be a lot of positive changes coming with that. So now we are going to go into our committee reports, and we have education and special education for Mr. Allworth and Mrs. Droppy. Did you meet?
Yes, we met, is that last week now?
Yeah.
I don't even know what day it is.
It was last week.
Whew. Okay. So, I'll do education committee if you want to do the special ed report. Does that work? Okay. So we discussed briefly the second reading today of policy 1648.13, the school employee vaccination requirement, which is resolution number 4 on today's agenda. It's basically an adoption of the state mandated policy. We have a lot of PD coming up, and we also discussed the importance of in-house PD and the value that teachers gain when the folks providing the professional development step into the classroom, or virtually in this case, and are able to sort of teach in as the teacher is teaching, and it gives the teachers immediate feedback and allows them to make those adjustments as needed. We discussed the math growth assessments upcoming for reading and math for grades 1 through 8. Please see parent letter. Dr. Dionisio already mentioned the Start Strong assessments and the PSATs coming up. SGO, student growth objectives, are due at the end of October, but we're still not doing student growth percentiles. This is all for, this is part of the teacher evaluation system, and student growth percentiles can't be done because we did no state testing last year, so we have nothing to go off of. And then mentors, teacher mentors will be meeting on September 30th. Just make sure I was unmuted. New teacher academy is coming up because, or it happened already on the 23rd, because it got canceled at the beginning of the year due to the flood. And I think that was it for, the last thing was, one of the big takeaways from the, we'll call it the diversity, equity, and inclusion trial meetings, right? That was like the pre-meetings to what is to come soon, was our now involvement in NEMNET, which is a recruiting firm in West Orange, or based out of West Orange, who specifically recruit educators, and do they do administrators as well, Dr. Miller? Administrators and educators who are people of color. So that is a really exciting step forward into diversifying our district. And one last thing, I don't remember what was the last thing I was going to say. Oh, and the committee, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee is narrowing down, or have narrowed down to their final choice, and they are finalizing the details of that, and more details to come very soon, I hope.
Okay, and from the special ed side, Dr. Mauriello already spoke about Dr. Kelly Moore in the presentation on the 30th, so please everyone either attend or tune in online, because that should be very, very, very beneficial. We've the Handle with Care training coming up. There's a couple personnel issues. There's a few paraprofessionals that are up for approval, but the paraprofessionals are always kind of in flux. And we have a big issue with transportation. Our bus 6 was out of order. We were able to get it fixed, but we got to kind of keep an eye on it. Busing, as everyone knows, if you've been watching the news, is an issue everywhere. But we're also having a problem with our actual buses, not just with the drivers. So we need to start looking towards purchasing 2 buses to keep all of our routes going. And we're looking at ways to maybe kind of modernize it. We're looking at electric buses, or possibly getting grants to help pay for all of this, because it is quite expensive. But it is something that we do need to do as a district. So So that's something that we'll be looking at in the next few months. And that's it.
Excellent, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Ed Committee? If not, Finance Committee also met, and that was Mrs. Jaffe and myself. And it pretty much got covered by Mr. Cruz's presentation and his report. What I do want to report out, the other thing that we did speak about, and I can't go into detail because we're still negotiating, but we did meet in confidential last week and heard from 3 different search firms that responded to our proposal to start recruiting for a permanent replacement for Dr. Dionisio. So we heard the 3 proposals. We have them on the table and we're going through them, looking at reference checks and comparing them apples to apples before we come up with our final decision on that. Was there anything else, Mrs. Jaffe, that you wanted to speak about that wasn't covered?
I'm just looking at the search firms. That was the last thing.
Yep, so then, does anybody else have any questions on finance? If not, we're going to continue on our agenda, and at this point, we could take public comments on agenda action items only. If anybody has any comments, please come to the podium and give your name and address before making your comment, and this is on action items only.
Good. Okay. Hi, Denise Rosella, 130 Personette Avenue. I have a question regarding, I guess it's resolution 6, and it also kind of goes towards resolution. No, I can't find it, but we recently are hiring a coordinator of mental health, and now resolution 6, which is the HBW audiovisual director job description. Is the HBW job description a stipend job? Is it a part-time job? Is it a full-time job? Also, where are the funds coming for these new positions? Is it coming from COVID funds, COVID relief funds? Is it coming from funds that we have allocated in the budget for that? If it is coming from COVID relief funds, would we not be better served to wait to see what the results of the testing that Dr. Miller sent an email out about earlier today, to see if perhaps we should be using funds more towards hiring teachers or giving teachers stipends to help our students regain the ground they may have lost during COVID? That's, it just seems like it might be a little bit premature to hire an audiovisual director when we still don't know how many maybe new teachers or tutors we might need to help our students who have lost academic progress. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Giselle. So in relation to resolution number 6, the audiovisual director job description, that's a stipend position for HBW staff. That's been pre-existing for a number of years at HBW, but since the nature of technology changes, the job description is changing just because the needs of the staff at the school has changed. So it's just an update to the job description in alignment. So that's always been paid for out of district funds. So it doesn't have anything to do with the federal funds or ESSER funds related to coronavirus.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Kristen Donahue, 31 South Prospect Street. My question is, how and when did you communicate to the public about this meeting being live streamed? My second question is, how does releasing the recording of this meeting one day early promote accessibility or inclusivity? How does releasing the recording of this meeting one day early engage the public in any meaningful fashion? And my final question is, when do you plan on choosing and announcing the new superintendent? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't really know which resolution that you were speaking about, which action items. This is for action items only. All right. So we're going to come back to that at the end. And now we're going to move on to any discussion items. Oop, one more, I'm sorry.
Shannon Heffernan, 83 Franklin. I hope this fits within the guidelines. I just had a couple questions on the food lunch program. I know we had, one of the things that was mentioned was how the potential change to that program would affect SCA funding. I guess my question was converse. How would being part of the federal program help offset the need to fundraise based on reimbursement that we could potentially receive? Does that fit within something I'm allowed to ask right now? Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll address that at the end. Okay. So we're open now to any old or new business from the board, any board discussion.
I had spoken to Mr. Day about this over the phone, but I wanted to update the board. I attended the Essex County, New Jersey School Board's meeting in person for the first time since the start of the pandemic, so that was really exciting. I had the pleasure of sitting completely by accident next to the NJSBA president, Irene Lefebvre, who is the board president of the Bhutan Township Public Schools Board of Education. And we really just had some wonderful conversations just about what it's like to have been a board member throughout this pandemic and how we both felt that the board has sort of gotten away from, you know, its core functions and roles and responsibilities in terms of governance. You know, because of the pandemic and because of the sort of liberties that we felt were necessary to take during that time, because of the nature of the situation and how boards really need to try and kind of get back to that and get back to, you know, making sure that the business side of things is effective and efficient. We also, at the meeting as a group, we also talked about Laura Wooten's law, which I thought was just really interesting to mention to the board. It requires civics instruction in middle school, and it's through the New Jersey Center for Civic Education, and provides all the curriculum and professional development that goes along with it. And how I think school districts have realized that this sort of shift to really focusing on history and examining history but not really talking about the civics side of things and really engaging in how to see history through the eyes of others. And I just thought that was really interesting and important. And I'm glad that that change is being made. Something else that was important that was mentioned regarding buses. The NJSBA is currently in conversations with the state to try and change the school bus driver testing requirements. There's a big portion of the test that requires bus drivers to be like extensively knowledgeable on the mechanics of the bus. And the NJSBA is thinking that if we can get rid of that portion of the test, because in reality, no bus driver is going to pull over when there's a mechanical problem, open up the hood and start working on that bus on their own. It's not going to happen. Yeah. So they think that if they can eliminate that portion of the test, we can attract more bus drivers, more qualified bus drivers. And that could help alleviate some of this kind of backlog that we have and lack thereof. And that was really it that we talked about there.
Does anybody else have any?
I just had one discussion item, I believe that came up, and I probably for Education Committee, but the calendar. that potentially you guys are having a dialogue about that?
Oh, yeah. Okay. We did. We started to look at the calendar for next year. And we had discussions about the possibility of maybe bringing in or allowing teachers like 2 days the week before, and then how that would impact the end of the year. And we sort of went back and forth on that. And I had said, as a teacher, boy, I would love 2 full days in the classroom without any PD, you know what I mean? Maybe like a nice conversation with the principal, superintendent you want to chat with, but like, I want to be in my classroom. And Dr. Miller heard that. And then, we also discussed the fact that it really doesn't affect the end of year significantly, because the way that the end of the year would fall on like a Tuesday, it wouldn't bring us back to the week prior. So that's still something, that we need to look into. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, thank you.
Was there anything else? We're good? All right. So we're going to move on to a roll call to vote on the resolutions. And I need a motion to accept approvals number 1 through 15. Moved by Mr. Day. Second by Mrs. Drappi. And Mr. Cruz, can you please do a roll call?
Mr. Allworth,
Yes.
Mr. Day,
Yes.
Mrs. Drappi,
Yes.
Mrs. Fresky.
Yes.
We have quorum, motion passed.
Excellent, thank you. And we do have addendums this evening. I need a motion to accept addenda items number 1 through 5. Moved by Mr.
Second.
Day. Second by Mrs. Drappi. And Mr. Cruz, can you do the roll call?
Mr. Allworth. Mr. Day.
Yes.
Mrs. Drappi,
Yes.
Mrs. Fresky.
Yes.
We have quorum, motion passed.
Excellent, thank you very much. And at this point, we could open up to public comments on any items. So I just wanted to start with Mrs. Donahue, and you had asked about the live stream. It was posted on our announcements on our Facebook, on our website. So where the resolutions and the agendas, there's a link to that. And that did have a link for the live stream on it for YouTube. And then the timeline on the superintendent, we don't have a timeline at this time. We're still evaluating search firms. And I think Mrs. Peterson from New Jersey School Boards, when she did the presentation, I think something that resonated with the whole board was not letting the calendar dictate the process. We really want to be thorough. It's a Board of Education's only direct hire, and it impacts the whole future of the school year. And it's generally anywhere from a 3 to 5 year contract. And we are going to take our time to get the right person in the seat for
To
that.
piggyback off of that too is in talking with Irene about this process as well. She interrupted me before I could even finish telling her like what we were going through and like, where we were in the process. She said, stop right there. I can't emphasize this enough. Take as much time as you think you need, because this is the most important thing you can do, and you need to find that perfect, just right person. You want to find that person that lasts as long as possible, that stays with that district as long as possible. And that can take as much time as you need. If you set a strict timeline and you find that you have to stick to it, you could be making some major mistakes. And I appreciated that.
I think it's also important to point out that we're pretty confident in the interim that we chose to keep us going while we're going through that search process. So it's not like we're just kind of, we need to rush through it. We're pretty confident in our ability to keep it moving.
I concur with that too, that we did, bring in a interim superintendent, of course, temporarily. But also, I believe the average superintendent lifespan, or not lifespan, but tenure, not tenure is 2.5 years. So the fact that we had Dr. Dionisio for 8, and prior to that, we kept bringing in new superintendents every year or two. So I want to thank you for lasting 8 years, and we wanted you to go longer, but we understand, you know, the changes required there. So for you, but we're very, you know, again, focused on finding the right candidate, and making sure that we select the search firm to work with us through that decision.
And at this time, if there are other public comments, to please come to the podium. Yeah, and just keep in mind, it's a 3-minute time limit. We're going to take notes and then make comments or answer questions at the end.
Hi, Kristen Donahue, 31 South Prospect Street. I wanted to go back to, I think it was 2 or 3 board meetings ago, I believe it was 2, where the board spoke about possibly to increase community engagement, there would be some sort of Google form, some option for parents to write in questions, and then have those questions answered at the meeting. I think that would be a nice way to promote engagement. So I was wondering if not only that, do you have any other ideas or plans in order to, you know, have that real community engagement? As, like I said earlier, this is simply releasing the recording, you know, 12 hours earlier. I don't really see how that addresses the issue of a lack of accessibility, you know, engagement with the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe make it louder.
Are there any other comments from the public?
Shannon Heffernan, 83 Franklin. So just my previous question about how the potential for connecting with the school lunch program and federal reimbursement, how that could potentially, the reimbursement from the federal government could potentially offset the need to fundraise. I had also 2 questions related to COVID. Is the district considering random COVID testing of unvaccinated students? My primary concern is the elementary school level, where none of the students are vaccine eligible at this point, just as a way to capture asymptomatic cases. And my other question was, who is notified if there's a positive case in a class? Is it just people that were considered exposed, or are all parents notified if there's a positive student in the class? I would advocate for all parents being notified so that the parents are empowered and are given some choice in how they want to handle that situation because of the change in the guidelines for what's considered an exposure, what's considered, you know, an outbreak. And we would then have the opportunity to get our children tested. Thank you.
I'm sorry, just for 1 second. I got the lunch program. I got the COVID on who's notified. I missed the first COVID question.
I was just asking if the district was considering, I know some other school districts and the governor had recommended implementing random testing of students. And so my question was, are we considering that as a district? My focus was really on elementary age kids because they're not vaccine eligible yet.
Hi.
Hello, Joanna Gagas, 22 Otis Place. Question about the assessments. How, as a district, without that state testing, are we assessing learning loss? Any learning loss that's happened over the last 18 months, however long it's been? When will the decision be made about the national lunch program? Certainly that's a question that the SCAs are going to want to get a handle on, even though our ability to get into the buildings right now is limited. Do we have a bus driver shortage? I'm just curious about that. And how much would those, can you hear me? Do we have a bus driver shortage? And how much would the electric bus cost? Would that come out of a different fund, or would that be all part of the same district budget? And I think just to reiterate the question about community engagement, there are definitely some good takeaways, I think, from everything that we've all gone through. And certainly you've all had to sit here for some grueling board meetings. But I do think that having a virtual option of some form has given access to families who otherwise cannot attend. So I also would be looking for some creative ways to increase community engagement virtually. Any ideas there would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christina Ford, 50 East Reed Place. I'm gonna go back to the Zoom thing as well. I would like to know who decided, in what form it was decided to stream today? And are you gonna make that on a week by or meeting by meeting basis, whether you're gonna stream or not? And if so, who made that decision? Was it done in confidential session? Or was it one individual that made the decision to live stream it tonight? And should we expect this at the next board meeting?
Thank you. Are there any other public questions or comments? If not, we're going to close the portion for public comment, and we will start to comment and answer questions.
So starting with
who made the decision to live stream this evening. At our last board meeting, it was discussed here in open, and everybody agreed. It was consensus that we would begin streaming. With no, yeah. And
I could jump in on a few things. So I'll jump in on a few items while the board reviews their notes if they want to add anything else. So we have been working with the Department of Health. So as a district, this goes to the question around testing of students and also of staff. So as of right now, there is no mandatory testing of students. We are partnering with the Department of Health. So there will be a vendor that will be assigned to the district. We are awaiting that notification from the Department of Health. We submitted for option one. We reported out at the last meeting. We communicated it out to the community. As soon as the Department of Health gives us that vendor, we'll be able to streamline the process for the mandatory testing for unvaccinated staff members. The deadline for that, based on the Executive Order 253 by Governor Murphy, is October 18th. So we internally are streamlining our procedures and process, and we're awaiting who that vendor will be. We also anticipate that testing will be available for students and families as well, students of families. And once we have those details ironed out, we can communicate that out to the public. And we're looking to have that located in one of our schools, so that way it's easy access for our community members. I think that's all I have out of the notes. The National School Lunch Program, actually I could piggyback off that, and then Mr. Cruz can then follow up. I know that he presented a few weeks ago on that, and as he mentioned tonight in the Business Administrator report, he's going to be following up and working with Mr. Balaj. There will be a survey that will go out to the community, and that will be able to solicit feedback. Mr. Cruz has also reported out to the public and to the board that he has met with our principals at the elementary school and the impact that it would have on the fundraising through the SCA, and also presentation several weeks ago in a board meeting in regards to the federal school lunch program, the National School Lunch Program. So that information is available for the public to go back and to watch prior meetings to get information. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add that maybe we didn't cover.
So actually you covered everything pretty much. So basically the reason why the SCA is not allowed to sell food or beverages during the school day, if we go into the National School Lunch Program, just to clarify that, we're basically going to an agreement with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and they don't allow competing sales of food when the school district is actually participating in the program. So it pretty much does not allow that. That's actually one of the pieces that we actually lose out on And for our elementary schools, it is a significant fundraising activity that generates a big portion of their fundraising for the year, which goes back to the school in programming activities. So we know that that's something that is significant. So we want to make sure that everyone and the public knows and is aware about the impact before we make a decision on this. Thank you.
Mr. Cruz, I was just going to ask, as far as the SCA fundraising, are there numbers on which schools do the most and what that impact will be, or is that something you're still gathering?
So I did actually get some numbers. The school that has actually impacted the most is Brookdale. In 3 years past, they generated $16,000 out of food sales in fundraising activity. That's just total fundraising that goes back into programming. The second largest school that will be impacted will be FM Brown. When they actually shared their financials as far as the last 3 years, the last school year, we weren't really going to base it on that because students were not in session, and fundraising activity, as you all know, didn't really happen. So we based it off of the 18-19 and even the start of the 19-20 school year. So the only other school that I'm following up with is Lanning, just to get a pulse of what the impact on Lanning will be. But based on that, it's 16,000 and 13 to 14,000 at each school.
Thank you.
I can answer a couple of these things as well. Pertaining to the assessing of learning loss, that is something that we've discussed in Ed Committee, and I did mention it before. We have map growth testing coming up, and that is right now the best tool that we have because it gives the teachers practically instant feedback within days of where students lie in each of these standards and according to their grade level. But it's a much more nuanced look at that than, say, the NJSLA, which is a little bit broader and of which the rigor is a lot, we'll say, in a nice fashion, and not always fair. So in terms of the bus driver shortage, yes, it is a national shortage. It is everywhere. It's every municipality, every state, it's the entire nation. So I know Ms. Palmarezzi, thank you. I apologize, Ms. Palmarezzi, for butchering your name. I know she is working incredibly hard on doing everything possible to find those bus drivers. That was reported out at the last meeting from Athletic Committee. And then in terms of the Google form question, we've kind of got a mock-up right now. We've been playing around with it to see the best way to use something like this. At this time, I'm still waiting to hear back from quite a few districts that use it, have either used it for a while or are currently now using it, now that they've switched to an only in-person and live stream only format. I have spoken to Milburn, and I have Fairlawn. I have a call in with Fairlawn tomorrow. What we're finding is that those communities have a communications director that they pay $100,000 plus a year for out of their budget, which is just not something that we can fit into our budget at this time. It is a huge responsibility, and you know, it's something that we individually have had conversations about, just talking about, of course, the benefits, right? So of course it increases accessibility to the board. But what we also find is that a lot of the questions that come to the board through email and Google Forms, and this is also coming from feedback that I'm getting from other towns, is that many, if not most of the questions that come straight to the board are actually questions that should be going to the teacher, the principal, and the supervisor, and then the superintendent in that order. So we still need to discuss how to best use that, if that's the right tool for us to use. You know, we've also been talking again individually about after I went to that meeting, for the county meeting, you know, we all had long talks one-on-one about the need to evaluate what our priorities are as a board again, and since COVID, and sort of regroup and make sure that we can get back to the job at hand, while still being a conduit for the public, but being able to sort of filter some of those conversations and direct them to the appropriate channels, rather than having to each play communication director. And I still think, I mean, this is still a conversation that is ongoing with us. And I understand, and I think most of us understand that the public is kind of hungry to get back to that instant access. But, you know, as a board, we also need to think carefully about if that is the right venue and the right avenue that works for us, because this is our meeting that we do in front of the public. By law, we need to have public comment, right? We give a long public comment in comparison to other districts, say like Livingston, who only gives their public 15 minutes, which I think we can all agree is not reasonable. Right. So, you know, we need to find that right balance that works for us and allows us to work efficiently and allows us to do the business well. So, you know, I think that's still something that we need to continue to discuss. I don't think any decisions have been made. We agreed on the live stream at the last meeting, and that was a step towards a compromise to what the demands of the public were and what we felt we could handle at this time, right? That's not to say this is the end all be all, but at the same time, you know, we will continue to discuss that in committee and independently. You know, and again, I really want to see how these other districts are handling it without a communications officer. And if we can find one who's doing that without a communications officer, how does that work? You know, who's doing that? Who's fielding all of this? Who's splitting up the information? Who's giving the, you know what I mean? So, because that's a lot for one person to do, who's a volunteer board member, who's also working full-time, so on and so forth. So I think that's a discussion that we still need to have.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Chappie. I also think that we can do a better job as a board on our website under the Board of Ed tab, have different information, connection, like maybe a flow chart, a chain of commands, and protocol as to where questions should be directed, because by the time things get elevated to a board level, they should be really emergent that was not able to be answered anywhere along the line. And again, and I think this is something that Mrs. Peterson discussed at the presentation that she did for us when we did our board eval, is the roles and responsibilities of the board. And we are super high level oversight, and we should be looking at our strategic plan and looking to the future and not be so much in the weeds, because then we get into managerial, we float into gray water, and we need to step back. And I understand last year was really an unprecedented year, to use the term that's been overused, but it has been. And I think we got too close to the edge of going down into the trenches where we need to back up. So I think with, you know, all the changes coming up, and we're going to be able to regroup and look at some of these other options. And, you know, again, to your point, Mrs. Drappi, it's a meeting for the board that's done in public. And accessibility doesn't always mean a back and forth conversation. Accessibility means having access to all the information, to the agenda, to what we're voting on, to the reports that we get. And everything is accessible, and it's accessible beyond what we're required to by the law. So we just have to find that balance.
Right, and I think when the public has brought to our attention times that the information has not been accessible, or times that we've missed information, we've rectified that as fast as we physically can. And I know we did look at some other websites. I know Lisa and I had this conversation. We started looking at other websites that we liked and where that information was presented. I shared with you guys my own district's website that I really liked, because it really broke down the board's roles and responsibilities. And I really like those slides where it was like, this is what micromanagement looks like. And this is what, I think they even used the word terrible board, which I don't know. Like, this is what a terrible board would do. And it's like all of these things that I think, like Lisa said, we got really close to doing during COVID. And I think that's a good kind of point of focus to start with as we revamp this a little bit.
Mr. Allworth, Mr. Day, anything to add? No, we're good. So at this point,
Oh, wait, there's one more thing. The electric bus question.
oh,
I know when we had, Dr. Mauriello brought it up and Tim and I were like, this is great. Let's do it. And he was like, all right, everybody take a breath.
Slow down.
Because while it was presented to us and we were like, I don't care, let's go. Like, this is such a good opportunity. The fact is that while there are electric buses available for purchase, there's like no person or people at these busing companies to service these buses yet, because they're all computers. So that is something to look for the future. I don't know that this is going to be available to us in the immediate future, because we really do need a bus sooner than later. That's kind of
Yeah, I think, all of those bus things are things we are looking at going forward. We're looking at grants. We're looking at the electric bus. It's all, we're early in the process. That's all stuff that's going to be purchased next year, not immediately. So I was letting you guys know where we're starting at. So.
And then that last question of, will the live stream change from meeting to meeting? It's not going to be a meeting to meeting decision. It's a decision that we made. A resolution was not needed for it. Just change of format. And so we're living it. This is what we're doing right now. If for whatever reason it doesn't work, we'll communicate that to the public, but I don't foresee that happening.
And Frank, I want to add, you're not going to get the Tesla bus, okay? Just when you know. So, okay.
thanks, Mr. Day. It's always good. So at this point, we do not need to fall back into confidential session. So I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Drappi.
Second.
Second by Mr. Day. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the meeting is adjourned. It's 8:22, and the next public meeting is Tuesday, October 12th, with confidential session at 5:30 and 7 p.m. public session in person here in the auditorium, and it'll be live streamed on YouTube. And thank you very much for showing up. And